All right, final touches to our prefabs to make sure we always have our notes done and we always have this as a frame of reference. So in order to add notes and informations, you're going to notice there's a little icon down here, and this is going to give us a few different options for checking information or adding in information. The first thing we're going to start with are dimensions, and you guys should be used to seeing this to some extent because we've talked about it before in other classes, or earlier in this class. And also, dimensions are just kind of the same thing as measurements. So what I want to do is just get some general dimensions out here. So that way I can make sure that my drawing is proper. So what you want to do is come here, click on this, come here, and you'll notice one of these icons will say dimensions if I hover over it. Make sure you have that selected. And there's a few things that I want to add into dimensions. So one thing is I want whoever's viewing it to understand that this is for an 8-foot wall section. The other thing that I want them to understand is that from center to center is 16 inches. So 1 foot 4 is 16 inches. Okay, 1 foot 4 inches is the same as 16. So although the overall height of the wall is 8 feet, that doesn't mean that our studs are 8 feet. So we should probably include that measurement as well. So I'm pulling that out to the side. So we know our inside studs are 7'9". The overall height of the wall is 8 feet. We have a gap between center and stud that's 1 foot 4 inches or 16 inches. Okay. There's some other small things that we're going to add in just so we remember the size of things. So right here, if I can, I'm going to add in, press the up arrow key to lock this in. I want you to know that that's 1.5. Yeah, that's 1.5. And then that this is 3.5. Okay, so we'll always know what those measurements are. So right now what we have is overall height, the distance between studs, and we even have the measurement of the stud itself. Remember, it's 1.5 by 3.5 for our measurements. Okay, first click starts the measurement, second click ends the measurement. There's one last thing that we should do, and probably include the overall length of the wall. So let's go from here all the way to here and up. Look at that, there we go, 7'9". But wait, there's a weird thing here, because it would be nice, it'd be more nicey nice if this was actually 8 feet long. It has to do with the way that your sheets of plywood and drywall are constructed and made. They're going to come in sheets that are 4 feet by 8 feet. So if this thing landed directly on, if the center of this stud landed directly on 8 feet, boy oh boy, that would be really convenient for a builder. So here's what we want to do. We're going to draw a line for a reference point out here. So we want this wall to actually be 8 feet. So how many inches are we going to have to add to this wall? For those of you talking to yourself, like I often do out there, 3 is the correct answer if that's what you were saying. So now I have this as a reference, and I can go back into this. Even though it's not part of the group, you see how I can still see that line right there? So I can still scale the center up until it references that. And the note on the screen will even tell you it's active for this outside point. So now that that's 8 feet long, I feel much better about myself and whoever is going to be designing or framing it. I did it to the top one. I'm also going to have to scale out the bottom one to that edge, and there we are. Okay, so what do we have happen here? We made this 8 feet wide, so that way we could just put 2 sheets of drywall or plywood on this to seal it up. And we're not going to have to do all sorts of funny or fancy cuts with our plywood. You'll notice also that this measurement, after we changed it, automatically updated. Right? We didn't go in and change this measurement. We just made this board a little bit longer, and it automatically changed for us. Okay? The last thing I want to do on this section is delete that little unneeded line. Okay? So we know this is 8 feet wide, 8 feet tall. The studs themselves for our common stud are 7'9". The 2x4 itself is 1.5 by 3.5. All right, so that takes care of our measurements for this. Let's go on to the door and add in some measurements. So again, I'm making sure I'm clicking the dimension. I got to know how wide or how open that is. I'd like to know also the height from corner to corner. I'd like to know the total outside width. That could be useful information, right? And a lot of this other stuff, the 8-foot height or the 7'9" height, we can infer from the other drawing. But what I could do is simply add it here, just to make sure that people understand, or whoever the viewer is, that this isn't the overall 8-foot height. That have that segment done as well. Okay. And let's see. The window, I think, might be the last thing to add. I guess what we could do, one other thing we could do, and this is just something that, you know, I'm overlooking a little bit just because I'm used to it being pretty common knowledge. For some of you, because this is relatively new, it might not be that common. These are still going to be spaced 16 inches apart, and this last one is just going to fall on the inside wherever it needs to. Okay, so we have a lot of measurements here that we can use, we can infer from. That means we can figure things out without knowing them, without having them told to us right out of the gate. All right, but I think the last real measurements that we need here that somebody might not be able to infer is this still 36 inches? Right? Is that number still 36 inches? Of course it is, but they have to know that. They have to be able to measure that, and then because it's a doorway, they don't understand. They're not going to know how big that piece is going to be. And we could probably even, for some of these supports here, add in a measurement. Those are all obviously still the same. Therefore, we don't need to measure each one. If we dimension everything, of course we could do that, but there comes in a time where it just becomes too much information. It's really hard to keep track of what's pointing to what. But I think overall what we have right now is we have a really good general idea of how this wall measurement, how this wall section pans out, and then what are the keys to it, and what are the measurements. We have a really good idea for the measurements on our door section, and these two are super similar, so there's only a few other measurements we had to add when considering the window for how that's going to be placed. All right, so we have all our dimensions done. Now we just have to label some things. I'm going to go through this relatively quickly because you guys know what these things are. You just don't know the names necessarily for them. But to add a name, we're going to come back down to the same tool and go to text. So this we're going to call common wall stud. And then click off. This is your top plate. Click off. Hey, turkey. Bottom plate. Okay, so we have our top plate, common stud, bottom plate. Top plate, common stud, common wall stud, bottom plate. This is where things get a little trickier, but not too bad. Anything on the outside, the total outside, is your king stud. It's the king. All right, that's for this side, and the same thing for this side. They're both the king. King of the west, king of the east, king stud. They're both the same. Now, someone could make an argument that this is over-constrained because I'm doing the same. It's obvious to tell that these two pieces are the same. I'm only going to over-constrain for that one just to prove a kind of a point. I can get a little janky or over complicated. So you have king studs both on the outside. Your jack studs are the ones that go in next to them. Both of these things right here, these, my friend, are called headers. No, we're not playing soccer, but that's what they're called. And these have, I'll see if there's a new word, but the way that I was taught is that these are called cripples. And there we are. So we have our headers, king studs, jack studs, and cripples. And that's how we're going to make a door. So it's the same stuff over here. The only thing that gets added to this is a sill plate, and that's what something rests on top of. Sometimes some people will refer to this as the top sill plate, or top sill, bottom sill, just to keep it from getting confusing. I just said that these were plates, and these is a sill plate, top, bottom, and sill, because this is like a window sill. Okay, these things here still are also still can be considered cripples. Okay, and obviously along the top, they're cripples as well. So we have a pretty exquisite, pretty awesome set of notes here. This will be the foundation for you framing out your entire house. Can't wait to see what you guys create with this basic knowledge. Come back. Next lesson, we'll be going over importing your floor plan and laying out the wall sections on top of it. Toodles till then.